Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I finally made up my mind on the 71 Highboy, what I'm going to do with the cab, so I'm going to fill you guys in with that. And I have the 360 engine in here, getting it ready to drop in the frame, so let's go dig into it. Hey guys, like I said, I have the 360 in here, getting it ready to drop in the engine. There's a lot of stuff we have to do to it. I need to change the oil, fix one broken exhaust manifold stud, get a dipstick in it. I'm going to reseal the valve covers and just generally check everything over. I also have to change out the distributor because it has some kind of aftermarket electronic ignition on it, and doesn't have the points anymore. So I either got to pull the cap and see if I can put points back in it or change the distributor. We'll see how that goes when I start digging into it. And just general stuff like fuel pump, water pump, all that kind of stuff. We'll be digging into that in this episode and getting it back in the frame, or not back in the frame. This will be the first time it's been in there since this truck didn't have an engine to begin with. But the last episode on this truck, I was asking you guys what I thought about the cab mounts and what I should do there. And a lot of guys, it was pretty much split 50-50 in the comments, probably leaning more towards leave it alone, just get it running and send it down the road. And I think that's what I'm going to do. Now, I was going back and forth about 100 times on whether I wanted to replace the cab mounts or not replace the cab mounts on this thing. And generally, it boiled down to I just don't want to spend the time. I've spent the last couple days working on the Ultimate Crew cab back there, actually a Friday and a Monday. Today's a Tuesday. And I had a lot of fun doing that, and I filmed some of it. You guys will be seeing that in a future video. But I just had to pull myself off of that project and start back on this one because I need to get this thing done and out of here and down the road so I can move forward with other projects. So that kind of made my decision a little easier because I'm like, if I start doing cab mounts, that adds more days and more hours I'm working on this truck when I could be working on that thing back there. So we're just going to do the bare minimum. Now, that does not mean we're going to do a poor quality job or a, dishonest job with this truck or anything like that. That just means I'm getting it running and driving and sending it down the road. So I'm just making a truck run and drive where you can use it if you want to. Somebody else can start doing cab mounts or start a restoration or just tinker with it on the weekends if they want to. But I'm going to make it to where you can drive it. At least get it to your place. The shipper can drive it or drive it while you're doing a restoration on it, kind of a rolling restoration kind of a deal. Or just leave it as is and enjoy it and use it. So I guess leave that up to the new owner of what they're wanting to do with it. So with all that being said, the cab is staying on the frame. We're not pulling the cab. I'm not pulling the transmission. We're leaving that MP435 in there. But I am going to be pulling that bell housing. I'm going to pull that bell housing and then undo the transmission bolts on this and leave that bell housing on the engine. And then we'll stab that together like that. So that's how it's all going to work. There's a few things we need to do in here before the engine is put in here. I need to pull those old heater hoses out and just kind of anything I'm not using, like this old fuel line. Going to pull that off and need that Z-bar there for the clutch. I need to pull that out of the way so it doesn't get in the way when we swap the engine. That kind of stuff. Change the donut gaskets on the Y-pipe. So those kind of things I want to do before the engine's in here because, for one, I have a lot more room and it's easier to do. Now, another thing I like to do while the engine's out of this thing is get a really good picture of the frame VIN just for selling purposes and verification purposes on the seller's end of it. If you have a really good high-quality photo of the frame VIN, it's really easy for them to verify the frame and the VIN and all that stuff matches. So I got in here and I started cleaning off the frame where the VIN is. Now on a Highboy, well, on any of these old trucks of this generation, bump side and dent side, I'm not sure about the older stuff, but they're probably the same way. The official VIN on these trucks is on the frame. There's an actual stamping on the frame, and that is considered the official VIN on these trucks. That is not removable or replaceable. So I think that's what the federal code, I can't remember what the code is, what it says, but basically if it's anything that can be removed or there's paint or anything underneath it, it is not considered the official VIN. And that's why the door tags on the doors on these trucks is considered a warranty plate and not a VIN number or VIN verification. And on the actual tag, it usually says for warranty purposes only, or not for registration purposes, something like that. So, all that being said, whenever you frame swap or body swap or anything like that, you really should go by the official VIN on the frame. I know people have done it other ways using the cab VIN and everything, but the correct way to do it is the frame VIN. So, all that being said, I like to verify the frame is correct, especially on something I'm selling, that all that matches and everything is correct there. So, on the Highboy trucks, you have one up here by the starter. It's like right below the starter on a V8 truck, and there's a hidden one under the cab. On a two-wheel drive truck, it's further up here by the front of the radiator support. Since this is a Highboy truck, it's back there by the starter. So I was in here, I was cleaning it up, getting it ready to take a good picture of it, and I was having a hard time finding it. Let me see if I can get in here and show you. I was scrubbing and scrubbing, and I just couldn't find the thing, and I finally gave up and decided that there is no frame or no VIN number on this frame right here. So that got me kind of concerned of, okay, why doesn't this thing have a VIN number here? Was it a warranty replacement or something of that nature? So I went to the hidden VIN location, which is a lot harder to get to, and it's under the cab. Let me show you here. I have it set up here with a mirror, so hopefully you guys can see it. If you're under a truck, and this is on a Highboy, it's pretty much, here's the frame cross member, or the cab cross member, that's the floor support, and here's the transfer case. So that kind of gives you a little bit of orientation. But it's up here on the passenger frame rail. Get you guys kind of zoomed in there. If I can get my mirror set up there. All right, can you see that number right there? I know it's going to be kind of hard to see, but the hidden VIN back here on the back of the frame is still there, so that's good. So, I did verify that it is the correct VIN for this truck. So that is a big head scratcher as to why this truck does not have the visible VIN up there on the front of the frame rail. I'm going to keep looking, but I did look all the way up and down that frame rail on the passenger side, and I couldn't find a VIN anywhere. So who knows what the deal is there, if they just forgot on this truck. But I am really glad that we have the one under the frame, or under the cab right there, so I can verify the VIN on this thing. So all that is all taken care of and matches the title I have for this truck. So I got a picture of that with that mirror. So that is all good now. I'm all happy about that. So now we're going to take our efforts and move it towards this engine and start getting it cleaned up. So let's go dig into it. All right, guys. Well, I was able to do a little bit more digging on the VIN number issue on this truck and why it's missing up there on the starter, the visible VIN. I was actually talking to somebody, and they said they've had one further up the frame rail, similar to a two-wheel drive truck. And lo and behold, right there is the VIN. So this VIN is a lot further forward than every other Highboy I have here in the shop and I've ever seen. They've always been right there by the starter, where the starter would be, right there by the exhaust. And this one seems to be up here on the front. And it got me thinking, I wonder if that's a San Jose thing or a later thing or something of that nature. And I do have a 72 San Jose built Highboy out in the yard there, and I went and looked on it, and the VIN number on it is back there by the starter. So it's not a late model deal, it's not a San Jose deal. It must just be a freak deal. Just somebody was doing them different, or somebody was filling in for somebody and didn't know where to put them and put them up by where the two-wheel drives are, or just something of that nature, just kind of, you know, weird stuff. So that goes to show that I'm still learning on these trucks. I don't know everything. I never claimed to know everything, but I always love learning more. So now I know if you can't find the VIN number back there by the starter, to look further up the frame there. And I did, whenever I was up here under the hood, I was looking up here, you know, all along here trying to find the VIN, but it's so far on the outside of the frame, you can't really see it when you're up in here. If you looked up under the inner fender there, you could see it, but just looking down like that, you couldn't see it. So that explains why I couldn't find it there just looking at it. But I did start on the engine. Got some of it tore down. I have the valve covers off, and it wasn't the cleanest engine. It was a little black, a little grimy, as to be expected, I guess, with a used engine. The valve covers I already cleaned out, but they had some just gunk buildup in them. Not really sludge. It was more kind of just like dried oil residue, because I think this engine might have been setting since the 80s, the late 80s. If I remember right, the tag on the back of this truck that this thing came out of said 88 on the tag. So either it had been setting for that long, or they didn't register it for that long, so it didn't get ran very much. So any of those options are possible, but with as black as it is, we might have a little bit of blow-by, so I am kind of taking a risk using this engine, because I could spend all this time and work getting this engine in the truck and it's fired up and things junk. Because the last time I ran this engine, it was with that bad carburetor, and it was just chugging and just blowing black smoke, and plus I didn't have any water in the thing. So it didn't run it for very long. So all those things are kind of, you know, I'm taking a risk. But I think, like I said, I looked in the cylinders with the bore scope. Those look pretty good. It's just going to be like if the rings are totally shot or something of that nature. And hopefully it wasn't chugging on gas for very long, because that can also wash down the cylinder walls. So all those things being said, I have the valve covers off, for one, to inspect things, and to reseal them, because this engine was incredibly greasy, if you remember, and the valve covers are a leaky spot that on these things that like to leak. So one thing I always like to do is I have this Permatex aviation gasket stuff. It's really sticky and really gooey, and it really likes to help seal up these cork gaskets. These are the gaskets I have for it, and helps seal these things up. Another thing I like to do is right here on the for the intake manifold gaskets, they have a little bit of nub that sticks up. I take a little cope chisel and cut that gasket off so it's flush, and that just gives it, you know, helps it seal up better and takes away a spot that it might leak down. I also ordered a bunch of parts yesterday to put on this thing. New distributor, because we have this electronic distributor. I'm not sure if that's a Duraspark distributor or if it's just different. I know the ignition that was on it the box was an aftermarket unit, but it might still use a Duraspark distributor, but I'm not sure. I'm just putting a new points distributor in it, so it's all easy and fits the truck perfect. I also ordered a new water pump, new freeze plug kit, and just some other odds and ends stuff that I needed with this thing. And we'll get that stuff on here. Oh, I ordered a carburetor too, because we didn't have a carburetor, and just general stuff like that. And I've kind of decided that I'm going to put a clutch in this thing, unless I take the bell housing off and the clutch looks like brand new, which it might. You know, it might have been replaced at some point. But since I think maybe this engine is all original, the clutch is probably all original, and it's probably pretty close to being wore out if it's not wore out already. So I have the parts, might as well throw them in there, and we'll do that before we throw the engine in there. And yeah, we'll just, I've got to wait on those parts, and then we'll start throwing this engine together. Well, since I'm waiting on parts for that engine, I thought I would take a chance to drain the transmission and transfer case and make sure we don't have any surprises there before I get too deep into stripping the transmission off of the other thing. You know, if I pull the plug on this and we're full of metal shavings or something of that nature, I'll know that we need to leave that transmission on. So, not really too worried about it, because obviously this truck was parked because it had engine issues, because it was bought without an engine. The engine was pulled. So hopefully the transmission is all good. But typically, these things don't get a lot of maintenance, so we'll give it a fluid change and a checkup. And same with the transfer case. Yeah, that looks really good. Probably didn't even have to change it, but now we know, I guess. Really nice color, doesn't have any metal in it. That's good. There is a magnet on the end of this plug, and it's got a little bit of stuff on it, but that is very, very normal. So we'll let that drain out and probably drain out overnight, and we'll top her back off. All right, moving on to the transfer case. Hopefully it's the same. These things do have a tendency to want to get some water in them, but since the vent is still intact on this one, hopefully we are good. Yeah, that looks good. I think it's the same story. Probably didn't even have to change it. But now we know. We'll let that drain out and we'll top it off. I'll do the same with the rear end, and I'll probably just check the front end because it's you know, hardly ever going to get used. If it's got good color in it, doesn't have a bunch of stuff in it, we'll just leave the front end. And I'm going to check the knuckles and probably have to top off the closed knuckle grease on the knuckles as well. All right, moving up to the front axle and the closed knuckles up here. This is a small ball Dana 44, so a 3,800 pound, no, 3,000 pound axle, and the HD is a 3,500 pound axle. So this is the smaller one, and it actually has the knuckles are smaller and the seals are smaller as well, and these seals are the ones that are pretty easy to get. The big knuckle ones are only from Torque King, I think, and they're like $100. So these are cheaper, but I was checking these out and they are still good. So I don't think I'm going to mess with them. If you can look, let me get the light in here better. If you can look in there and see, there's still some fabric in there sandwiched between the metal plate and the ball. So the felts are still good, and hopefully that means that there is still some grease in there. We'll check the oil level and see what we got anyway. You can see how caked on everything is here. The oil that's in these things is really thick. It's like an oil and grease mixture. And typically these things are caked on with this kind of stuff. And this is after I've steam cleaned everything, and it doesn't really want to come off very well. There's the plug. You can see some of it there on the end of that plug. Some people I have seen put like gear oil in this, and that typically just runs out or oozes out the front lockout hub and makes a mess. Or they put like wheel bearing grease in here and it isn't thick enough to get up here to the top bearing or make its way into the U-joint that's in there. Oh, we still have some. If you guys can see that. Can you see that? There's still some in there, although it looks like we're pretty low. Well, about half. So at least there's still some in there. So that means our seals are good and our bearings are probably good on the axle. I haven't even jacked the wheel up to check wheel bearings. We'll be doing that at some point. But at least we still have some in there. I'm still going to top it off. Ordered some anyway just because I need some on hand. I'm out. So we'll top that off once I get that grease in. And I'll check the other side. Hopefully it's the same story. I'll let you guys know if it's not. But yeah, I think the drivetrain maintenance is going pretty well. I'm going to, hopefully those parts for that engine show up pretty soon here, and I'll get started on the engine. Back on the engine here, working on just getting stuff a little bit closer to being ready. The I have taken the dipstick off of this engine for the Harbor Blue Highboy. I robbed the dipstick off of this thing, and when I did, I broke off one of these exhaust manifold bolts that screws into the top of the head here, and these on FEs are notorious for breaking off because you can see how hot this ear that sticks up. It gets really hot on the exhaust port, and then they seize up in here. So this one has been broken off, and over here on the other side, I think they've replaced the exhaust gasket before, and you can see the old farmer fix, which is to drill through it and put a bolt and a nut. So what I'm going to do is try to drill it out, and if I can drill it out and get an easy out in there and get that out, I'll do it. If not, I'll just do the old farmer fix, since we already have it on the other side, and drill it all the way out and put a bolt and a nut on it once I get a dipstick in. I have a new reproduction dipstick coming, and once that gets here, we'll have to paint it up, and we'll bolt it on there, and we'll move forward from there. Then we got to do our freeze plugs, which I don't have that kit yet. And I definitely want to do the freeze plugs before the engine goes in. But I'll do freeze plugs, and I got my distributor in, so we'll see about stabbing that in, and stuff like the fuel pump and stuff. We'll start to knock that stuff out. So I'm going to get after this bolt and see what I can get done. All right, I've been working on this dang busted off exhaust manifold bolt for a couple days now. Finally got a hole drilled all the way through it. You can see the shavings there on the floor. So I'm just going to put a bolt through this. I'm just doing the old farmer fix for it, because this isn't like a super nice, fully original, fully restored engine or anything like that. So I'm just going to do the bolt trick and not mess with rethreading the head, because I'm not taking this manifold off, because I don't want to mess with all of these. I did try to see if I could gently nudge these loose, and they just absolutely weren't having it. So I didn't want to risk busting one off and having to, you know, spend another week messing with this. So just going to do that. And I got a new dipstick, Highboy dipstick. This is from Vintage Truck and 4x4. They're making some good stuff for these Highboys. They make the best front crossmember replacement for the leaf spring crossmember I've used in the past. I really like theirs, and they're also making a bunch of other stuff for Highboys, and this dipstick tube is one of them. And I didn't really read the description that well when I bought the thing, but he has two, one for an original and one for with headers, and I got the one with the original, and he makes it so it's up here with the second bolt head there. I'm not going to take it out, obviously, but it's up here, and it's actually a really good design. It makes it a lot easier to check the oil, because the factory one's back here in the back, and you have to reach way back in there to get it out. And if you have a power brake booster, it's right here in the way in the master cylinder. So this is a really good design, and I'm probably going to be using this in the future on restorations that use an original FE engine, because it's really nice. It has a nice rubber seal on the dipstick and everything. But the problem comes, it requires you to take this bolt out. And this is the one I did try to see if it would wiggle out a little bit, and it was just absolutely not having it. And I was getting close to probably snapping the thing off, so I just decided to quit and abandon this idea and put it on the shelf for another project, one where we have the exhaust manifolds off already. So I have, the only original one I have is this one here. Get this one out of the way. This one here is the only original Ford Highboy dipstick I have, and unfortunately it's broke off the tab. So it goes in here like this, about like that, and it's this thing's curled up, so you kind of got to imagine. But it has a long tab that goes over here to this bolt and holds it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make something, since this one's already broke, and it's going on this kind of patched together engine. I think it'll be just fine to make my own little strap there, and we'll use this one on this truck and save that nice new one for a nice new restoration build, and we'll see how that turns out. I found a partial freeze plug kit, and I have one of the freeze plugs replaced there. You can see the one that came out. See how bad that is. And I have the new kit, and I think I'm probably just going to replace them all because it's pretty easy. And while it's out, they can look nice and clean like this one does, but on the inside, they'll look like that. So we'll just do it while I'm here and get it taken care of. And I got to throw some spark plugs in the thing. I got a reman distributor there. Got to throw that in it, and a few odds and ends things. Still waiting on a water pump to come in, and we'll get this engine ready to go in. So I'm going to get after it. All right, here's what I came up with on the dipstick, the new dipstick tab. I have it in here pretty much. It's just a little piece of bent sheet metal, and bent it right there for the tab. You can see the bolt that I have in there, like I said. And here I just have it clamped together to the original dipstick tab that was broke off right there. And I'm just going to yank this out of here and weld that up, and we'll have a new dipstick. So that's how I did that. Pretty simple trick. Probably wouldn't have done this on a restoration, but this truck, it fits just fine. I think it'll look just fine. So we're going to get that finished up and continue moving forward with this engine. Okay, I got the dipstick all welded up. You can see how that turned out. Just a little bit of a weld there. You can't even hardly tell. And when this thing's in the truck, you're probably not even going to notice unless you look really close. So we now have a functioning Highboy dipstick without having to break off another bolt. So happy about that. And turned out really nice. So over here on the front, I have the new fuel pump in. The water pump still hasn't come in, but that's not a big deal. That can be put on at any time. I have yanked the old distributor out. I have a new remanufactured, or I guess it's not even remanufactured, just a new points distributor put in this thing. And before I put that in, I'm going to prime the oiling system on this thing because it was, everything I've had out has been really dry. The, like under the valve covers, everything's just been dry. And that is probably a lot to do with the oil that was in this thing was like 50% gas because this thing was running so rich. So that gas kind of washed away all the oil and stuff on the inside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prime the oil system like it's a new motor and get that oil circulated and just get it everywhere where it needs to go and kind of give us a little bit better chance of not damaging this engine if the bearings are dry and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to do that. I have a pressure gauge set up here so we can just keep an eye on the oil pressure and just see what it does. So I'm going to start cranking on this thing and we'll see how long it takes to build oil pressure and what it gets up to. Okay, my system to prime is just a drill with a 1/4 inch deep socket on it, so the shank has enough room to fit down in there. And then I tape it on because I don't want it to pop off when I pull it out and fall down in the engine. So just 1/4 inch extension with a drill. You go down in here to the oil pump drive that the distributor seats into, and these spin counterclockwise, so spin it counterclockwise to start pumping oil, and we'll see how long it takes. There it goes. There's the relief. What are we at? 65. 60. That's pretty good. Of course, you know, the oil is cold and everything. And the engine obviously isn't spinning over. But we'll let it run for a little bit and make sure that oil is pumped up to the lifters and all the way up to the rockers. And give it a chance to get oil everywhere. I also like to spin the crankshaft a little bit just to get it in a different position. Do that a few times. Probably a little bit unnecessary, but it makes me feel better anyway. Just make sure those bearings get good oil coated all the way around. There, I'm just barely spinning the drill, and that thing has good oil pressure. Of course, the oil is getting thick now, so that's not really a good indication of your bearing life, but you know, that drill just sitting there just barely spinning like this is going to be a lot slower than the engine is going to be turning over at idle. So I think we're going to have some decent oil pressure, at least when it's cold. Now, I do have, the reason it's all hooked up with the forklift is I have the transmission out, and I am glad that I decided just to go ahead and replace the clutch, because a peek inside of there, everything just looks terribly greasy and grimy and just nasty in there. So I'm guessing that the clutch is probably looking the same and probably nearing the end of its life. So I'm going to pull this bell housing off, try to clean everything out, and we got a flywheel and a clutch and a new throwout bearing, and we'll throw those things in there so we know all that's good and we won't have to take that back apart. So once I do that, we'll pretty much be pretty close to stabbing this thing in. We got motor mounts and stuff to do, and I did get the plugs changed out on both sides, so you can see that. And I guess I should show you the old ones. If you remember, they look pretty decent on the outside, like this one here. See how it's nice and clean? It looks pretty decent. But on the inside, it was really corroded and getting thin right there on the edges. And right there, I poked through it with a screwdriver. So that just goes to show, even if they look good, like this one here, the backside's probably pretty compromised, especially if you've had one that was rusted through already. Just spend the time and replace them all. So when they're in the truck, it's a lot harder to do. But since it's out, I mean, we're talking, it took me like 10 minutes to do the rest of them, so it's kind of silly not to do them, but glad I did. We also got to throw some spark plugs in there. I got those. There's some Autolite 45s. There's factory replacements. We'll gap those for points and throw them in there. And thermostat, water pump, all that kind of stuff. Throw the distributor in there. Oh, I guess I should tell you what my plans are with the distributor. So, since I've turned the crank over, my original plan is not going to work, so I didn't really think that through. But right there, I have 0 marked on the dampener, if I get the camera in the right spot. I have 0 top dead center marked on the damper, and I had the rotor on the old distributor pointed at this mark right here on the intake. So that is for number 1, firing at number 1. So when I put the new one in there, I'll do the exact same, just so I know we're pretty close. And I'll have to make sure that we're on the compression stroke on number 1 over here, since I did turn that. My original thought was I won't have to do that because I'm just pulling it out and put the new one in, but since I decided to prime it and spin the engine over, I'll have to make sure, because you can be 180 degrees out. So anyway, you guys probably already know that. So the distributor hopefully goes in no problem. It's the cap is a little cheesy looking, but I guess it will work, and it does have a number 1 marked off right there. And if you guys are curious, there is the part number for the Cardone new points distributor for an FE, for a single, what do they call that? Single port diaphragm vacuum advance. There's a dual port and a single port. You know, this one's single port. So I'm going to get going out of this stuff and try to get it knocked out, and pretty soon we'll be stabbing this thing in the truck. So I'm going to get after it and see how far I get along. All right, guys, we'll have the engine up on a cherry picker. I thought about doing or using the forklift to put the engine in, but I decided against it. I've done it in the past with like big F700 truck or F600 four-wheel drive trucks where it's really high. Used a forklift to put an engine in one of those, but you get putting an engine in, especially with a manual transmission where you got to get the input shaft lined up and put in and everything happy there. It's kind of a finesse thing. And with the forklift, I decided it just didn't have enough finesse. So got the cherry picker out and got it picked up, and got the clutch installed, the new flywheel installed and torqued down. And of course have the alignment tool in there, and it slides in and out as it should. Always, most of the time when I've ran into problems with these things, it's always been the clutch disc alignment with the input shaft. I don't know if it's whenever I'm putting it in, I don't have it aligned just right, and it moves the disc or something when I'm trying to twist the engine and get it aligned just right. But then you're always fighting trying to get the engagement. So hopefully I'm going to take my time. That's kind of another reason why I wanted to use the cherry picker instead of the forklift, because the forklift's kind of like a big hammer, where this is kind of like a little bitty small hammer. You can kind of finely or finessely get the engine in there, what I'm saying. So we're going to give it a shot. I think everything's pretty much ready to go in. I'm going to chase the threads on the exhaust manifolds just to make the screwing new nuts on there a little bit easier. But other than that, we'll throw this thing in there and see how it fits. I got the new motor mounts installed, so those will fit down in the motor mounts on this thing. Basically, and that's, well, I'm going to put the bell housing on. I guess I should mention that. I'm going to put the bell housing on with the new throwout bearing. So I'm going to put that on here, and then we'll put that assembly in and stab it into the transmission there. So then we only have 4 bolts to connect instead of all the bell housing bolts around all the bell housing. So that's the way I've always done it. We'll see how it turns out this time. So I'm going to get after that stuff, and I'm going to clean up my mess here, and then we'll stab the engine in. All right, guys, well, I got the motor in. So yeah, like normal, this thing fought me all the way in. They don't ever just fall right in, it seems. The biggest hurdle is getting that spline lined up and then getting the pilot bearing to seat it in the snout of the transmission. But it's in now, so now that's the biggest hurdle on this thing, but we have a lot of odds and end things to finish up on this. But I think I want to fire this thing off as soon as possible just to make sure everything sounds good in that engine before I get too far along on it, just because it's kind of an unknown and kind of taking a gamble on it. But yeah, whenever you're putting these things in, the biggest thing is to remember your orientation of your input shaft and the orientation of the engine, and making sure they're rotated to the same plane, and that helps that input shaft get in the right spot and slide in the clutch disc. So sorry I didn't film this in live time as I was going in. For one, it just takes a long time to get these things in. Cuts back on the editing, not having to cut back all that live footage. But also I was kind of in a time crunch when I did it, because it was about 4:30 whenever I started it, and it was kind of borderline, do I start it or do I wait till the next day? Really, I'd have to. This is a Saturday. I'm trying to get stuff done on this truck, so I'm kind of working on a Saturday, and I got some stuff in the beginning of the week, so it's going to be like Tuesday, Wednesday before I'd get back on it. So it's kind of like, well, I'll just see how far I get along. And we got it in, thankfully, at the end of the day. Still have some time left over. So I'm going to leave it here, And we'll be picking back up on this thing at a later date. Another episode on this truck whenever we get all this engine, we get it fired up and see how it is, and we button everything up in the engine compartment, and then we start putting the rest of the truck together. So you're not going to want to miss that. Hit subscribe so you can see that. Give me a thumbs up if you're liking this 71 Highboy in this build. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.